This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
This episode is brought to you by Disney's Mufasa, The Lion King. Get tickets now for the ultimate family holiday movie experience. Reunite with the characters you know and the untold story you'd never expect. Witness Mufasa's rise from orphan to king and see how the legendary villain Scar got his name. Disney's Mufasa, The Lion King, in theaters everywhere this Friday. The kingdom awaits.
Hello, you're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder. It's where we get on interesting musicians and artists to tell us about all the different work they've done, including all the effort that goes into doing what we know them for. And on today's episode, we hear from Bartees Strange, getting ready to release their new record, Horror, which is coming out in February on Valentine's Day, if you're keeping track of that. It's a great sounding record, Horror. A couple of tracks have come out from it. Lie 95 and Sober, and there's this element similar with his last record, Farm to Table, out a couple of years ago. There's this theme of being scared and uncomfortable and looking at the experiences that you've had in your own life, especially the uncomfortable ones, and working through them. I think that's a positive message. That's one of the things I like about Bartees Strange, and there's great lyrics, great rhythm, and good range to this record. So coming up, it's Bartees on 101 Part-Time Jobs. If you like this episode, make sure you click subscribe. We put out 2 episodes every week with bands and artists who we think are great, and hopefully you will too. If you're able to leave a review on Spotify or Apple, wherever you're listening to this, that would be massively, massively appreciated. Heading into the new year, I'm fully aware that we're a small independent company that's trying to keep on going and keep on making interesting programs that capture this feeling of inspiration and stoke. So thanks for being here. And I've just reinstated our Patreon, where if you're able to help us out with a couple of quid every month to keep this show going, we'd be incredibly grateful for any support that you have for us there. You can head to patreon.com/101 part-time jobs, and anything upwards of £1, $1 a month would be amazing. Thank you. Coming up, it's Bartees Strange. 101 Part-Time Jobs. Do you remember the first time, and maybe it happens all the time, I don't know, tell me, but do you remember the first time you were like, this is scary?
Oh, like job-wise or life-wise?
Life-wise and Bartees Strange-wise, playing music-wise.
The first time I ever was like, oh, this is scary, was when I was, standardized testing.
Okay.
I remember like having like my first like placement tests in like late elementary school kind of vibe. Like, oh, like if you do well on this, you'll be in advanced classes. If you don't, maybe you'll get held back a grade.
Yeah.
If you do good on this, and, I remember being like, oh man, I am mortified of what this is going to say about me, because I had moved around a lot as a kid. So I was advanced in some ways, but really far behind in other ways. I wasn't the best communicator as a kid. I was kind of like a weird kid. And so tests like that, one size fits all tests like that, they would scare the shit out of me, because I was always like, I feel like I'm smarter than this test is going to say I am. And you guys are going to think I'm dumb. I think I had a huge complex with that when I was a kid, thinking I was dumb. And so those were the first things that really, really scared me, was like the Scantron and having to fill in those little bubbles and second guessing every little bubble. I'd have the biggest anxiety attacks about it. Like I felt like I could justify every single answer, and I would always do bad on them. And it was like I would always come home and be like, Mom, I did such a bad job. I feel so ashamed. You know, it was just like I would dread it for months. It was horrible. Yeah.
I mean, being defined by something like that at such a young age is wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It was horrible. They don't even do it that much anymore nowadays. I think in the States, for the most part, they've deprioritized it for like more essay style questions and stuff, which is smart. But I was Scantron era.
Scantron. Did you find your crew at school? Did you find the people that you'd listen to Fall Out Boy and Enter Shikari with? At what age did you find your friends there? If that happened in high school or middle school?
Definitely happened in high school when I started driving. My parents were super religious, so I wasn't allowed to listen to the radio or like anything really, if it wasn't Christian. So my favorite and first bands were actually like that group of Christian hardcore bands that everyone thought weren't Christian. So like As Cities Burn, Under Oath, Switchfoot, POD, Norma Jean, Job for a Cowboy, all those heavy rock, like in hardcore and post-hardcore bands, the Almost, Tooth and Nail, that whole label, Emery, because those bands played at churches and they would play at clubs. So I could see Norma Jean play in a church basement, and it was like the heaviest show that you could possibly go to. And that's when I started meeting people that didn't go to church. Was kind of through that stuff. And then I started driving, and when I started driving, then I could like hang out with whoever I wanted and listen to whatever I wanted. And so I was like 15, 16 when I started meeting other people and playing in bands, and my mind started to expand a little more.
Was that cool with your mom?
I think by then, like my parents were kind of like, we did our best to make sure that was right from wrong. He's on his own, kind of. So at that point, they also knew that I loved music. So I was bringing home, I was like, Mom, like, I love this stuff. Like, I want to know how to make it. Like, how do I record it? How do I, consume it and put it back out? By then, I was kind of learning that I really liked performing music that I make too. Because up until that point, I was mostly just singing in church. I wasn't really writing songs until I was like in high school, and I was like, I really like this. So.
And there's that time where like you could record stuff at home and it sounds pretty good. I mean, GarageBand was starting to become this ubiquitous thing, and I don't know, maybe just my experience, but there were people my age, and I don't think it happened in our parents' generation, where they were going to college or uni to do music engineering, to do music production. That felt like a brave new world when we were like 17, 18. That was like a new idea. So I'm saying that because I wonder if like for your parents and from like, an academic standpoint, it's like that's what people can do that. People study that. It's a thing that people do and they make careers out of it.
Yeah, well, my mom is an opera singer, so I had a musician in the family who, I woke up every day hearing her warming up. She was training people. She had gigs. I used to go and watch her play, and I was always amazed by it. But as a kid, music always seemed kind of lofty and unattainable because all the musicians I knew were highly trained, world-class musicians that were friends of my mom. I didn't know like guys that played in bands or people who were like, gigging in clubs or anything like that. Nothing contemporary. I knew like the best jazz pianist in the Midwest, or like that was the people my mom would hang out with. So it wasn't until like seeing Norma Jean and some of these heavier bands in churches and in small clubs that I was like, oh, like discordance is cool. Like, harmony in this other way is, I'm starting to realize, it felt like, okay, anybody can do this. And that's kind of what was my on-ramp into it.
Yeah. And like the art is being a bit wayward and being a bit groovy and doing like muscle memory or doing kind of what your body feels like rather than what your eyes are seeing on the sheet.
Right. And I couldn't really connect with the sheet. I always, I was naturally good at music, but it wasn't like I couldn't read it, you know?
And you cared enough, because I mean, I often think like people when they start bands. I mean, even Elliott Smith. I don't know. He comes to mind because I saw something early on YouTube flashed across. But I mean, I don't know how old he was, but he took like a good few years to write songs that were Elliott Smith songs. And you know, anyone, no matter who you are, it's going to take years to write songs and continually like own yourself and keep on chipping away at that iceberg or whatever imagery you have. And the thing about that, I think, is that when you're a teenager and you're not writing your best songs yet, but you're still probably more determined than ever, it's like a really interesting energy.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people that love writing songs that want to write more. I'm like, being a teenager or being in college, I think the only reason it's good is you have just less shame. Like, you will say the thing you're thinking, you'll get all of the bad ideas out. And I always think of like art as like a game of numbers. Like, let's get all these shitty ideas out.
Yeah.
Let's get them all out, because there's good
Yeah.
stuff in there, but you know, you got to record the 100 bad things to get that one really nice nugget, you know? So,
And then maybe that's the game, because do you put out all of those songs? Because you can. And like, if they're on physical, they're there forever. I guess maybe that's one of the big scary things about that process.
yeah, people are too scared of that. I mean, I would love to put out more of my garbage, frankly. I guess, dude, I think it's sick. Like, I think the worst thing about music is like people feel like they can't do it. Like, people listen to a band and they're like, how do you do that? How do people do this? And it's like, man, like these people have limited skills, limited time, limited resources, and they just like, you're hearing the best one. You know, you're hearing that one moment it all worked. I think it would make everyone feel like they could be more creative if they heard steps 1 through 5. You know, like that's what like got me so pumped about music, is the mess of it, you know, and the process of it. That's the actual inspiring part. When it's all polished and perfect, that can actually be like demotivating, you know? It's like watching a Radiohead show with no context. You don't leave that show feeling like you can write a good song. You leave that show being like, the only people who should be writing songs is Radiohead.
I totally get it. And I think I mean, there's got to be bands out there that I haven't heard of yet, or we haven't heard of yet, but who are like guided by voices, who do the GBV thing, where it's like, it's just get it out.
Yeah. A band that I love like that is like Car Seat Headrest.
Yeah.
Like Will, I mean, early when they were getting started, I remember Will had like 9 albums on Bandcamp before anybody even knew Car Seat, and they were good, you know? But he was just cranking them out in his place in Virginia, and then someone found him eventually and they kind of popped off. But it's like, it's sick that all of that back catalog is around, you know? You can like, yeah, it's great.
Alex G.
Yeah.
Alex G once I mean, as like a music journalist, like, you know, when I read like a good quote, that sort of fires me up more than anything. And one of the latest ones, it was a little while ago now, but Alex G said writing songs to him and finishing a song was like, yep, another one on the scrap heap, another one on the bonfire. What's the next one? And I thought that's such a great way. You know, it has so much humility. It's human. It's like, emotions are like that. You know, we live a day and the day's finished. You know, we live these emotions and the emotions change.
Yeah. And I have friends who, like, every song they've written, they have put out, and they have only written 30 songs. And then I have friends who are more like me, where it's like, it's not hard for me to write 2 or 3 songs a day because I don't take any of them that seriously. They're all just like, yeah, cool. Let's do another one. What's the next one? You know, it's like, and that feels good to me, because kind of like what you're saying, emotions are like that too. Like, they run through you and you don't feel that emotion the same way the next time you feel it. Like, it's all being rinsed and recycled. And yeah.
It's the therapist thing, isn't it? Therapist has said, you know, think of passing thoughts as clouds. You know, they pass through the window, they pass in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
When you collaborate with people, because you've done, I was wondering, you know, because when when Farm to Table, around that area, it felt like, I mean, I don't know how many songs you'd written, before the first record, or how many songs you'd written between the first record and the second one, but it seemed I was reading a lot about you collaborating with various artists and like going to different studios. And I thought, to me it made sense. It was like, okay, you're someone who's pushing forward your sound, pushing forward your ideas, your visual, your direction. And I was like, that's a hell of a job. That's a hell of an everyday thing to be like, which direction am I going in? Because I imagine the further you get into something, the more choices there are to be made.
Yes. I mean, yeah, that's true. But I feel like that's also the exciting part about making things, is like making them, like going and meeting all these people and bringing your ideas and being open to them changing. I'm not a very precious person. I love when I have the worst idea in the room. I love hearing what other people think and how it can improve what I want to do. I feel like I'm a really good facilitator and organizer. So I love looking at all the ideas and then picking things that I think fulfill my vision the best. And that's kind of how I've always written songs. It's like I come up with like the nut, like the center, but the people in my life, they fill in the blanks, and I, arrange that. And so that's a part of my process of writing, I think, is like that exploratory phase. Mm-hmm.
And when you say like the people in your life, will that be maybe someone said a line, or you had this conversation, or someone put you onto a sound, or an energy from someone? How do you think the people around you, how do they come into your sound, into your records?
Yeah, I mean, it can be that, but it's also like booking a session with Jack Antonoff, and being like, hey, let's like just turn some music on. Like, what do we both like?
Yeah.
Let's write something like that. Or my friend Graham Richmond, who lives near me here in Baltimore, like me and him, he's worked on probably every song I've worked on in the last 4 or 5 years. He's just like a close friend. And, we hang out, we get drinks together, we eat crabs together, we play piano together, we go to the gym together, so it's like ideas and things flow from those interactions all the time. And it could also be from like, it's like from a session to a hang to a show.
Yeah.
Like everything, I'm kind of synthesizing it all.
How do you know what's not work?
How do I know it isn't work?
Yeah.
I don't know. Music doesn't feel like work to me. So it's all kind of like just fun. I feel like I'm just in a playground, like, because I feel like I used to work all the time. Like I had like a really intense professional career in my 20s, and this was all I ever wanted to do, was be in studios and write music and do that. And now it's all I do. And I'm like, well, this was the fun thing. And I'm still just having fun. It doesn't feel like, there are some times when I'm like, dude, this is a fucking job. But most of the time I'm like sick. Like I'm going to wake up, I'm going to write a few songs. I'm going to record some stuff. I'm going to try and get better at it. I'm going to hang out with some friends.
Yeah.
Go home, do it again tomorrow. It's nice.
Were you working in communications for a non-profit? I read that and I wasn't sure if how true is that?
Yeah, I did public affairs. So I worked in the Obama administration for a little while. I lobbied before then, and then afterwards I did like environmental justice work as a public affairs director and comms person. Wrote a lot of speeches, ran a lot of campaigns. That was good.
So going into like a band artist environment, working in a team, that's some good practice.
Yeah, like I was saying, I was like, I feel like I'm a good facilitator. Like I'm good at putting teams together and like trying to solve a problem. So producing records is pretty much that, in a way, the way I like to do it anyways.
I often think like when people get jobs in their 20s, and I'm 33 and I went through that period of having a job that I was like, okay, this is it. And my heart sank very quickly. I was like, it's so good to know that that's just a small part of life.
Yeah.
And I know most people who listen to this show are sort of 25 to 45. So people kind of going through that thing where like they've had that thing that they thought was the one and then realized that it wasn't most of the time. And it's just nice to know that other people go through that.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember being 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and being like, I make good money, like this is my life now, I guess. Dot 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 dot. Just like, oh, oh, I don't want my life to be over so quickly. For me, I was like, I want an adventure. I want to enjoy my life. I don't want to feel like I'm just working to save money, and then when I'm in my 60s, I'll go on a really nice vacation. It's like, I was like, I'll just take the no health care and I'll just die young with a smile on my face.
Yeah.
But hopefully
Yeah.
that doesn't happen. But, it just didn't feel good. Mm-mm.
Does it come from music, do you think? Does it? Because it can't just be music fans that feel that way, obviously, but there is something about being into punk rock and, pop punk or hardcore, whatever, when you're a kid that kind of, you look up and you live your life every day with these records made by people who set out their own destiny or set out their own mission statement. There is something that runs deep in that.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that my ethos is a combination of obviously like lessons learned from my parents and how they've lived their life, but also like the people I admire, like which are, musicians and artists and filmmakers and people who were like, I want to do this my own way. And I've kind of,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel about my life. Like I want, there are ways I want to feel every day. And if I don't feel those ways, it's just not going to work. I'm not going to do it. And there's a time when I would put my feelings aside and pound the pavement like everybody else. And, I thought that's what you're supposed to do when you're a young person trying to make money and survive without, a family that's wealthy. Like you have to do things you don't want to do. But after a while, you ask yourself, at what cost? Like, at what cost? How much am I willing to give of myself before I get something I actually want? And that was the calculation I was making. And then I hit a point where I was like, there are things I want more than a career as a public affairs person or to look fancy on paper. Like I want to feel good about myself. And that was kind of what precipitated a multi-year transition to doing music full time. It took a long time, but it was worth it.
What was the first moment, the first milestone memory that started off that period of time?
When I was 25, I moved to New York, or 24, 25, whatever. And I was right before I had this dream of like, okay, I'm going to move to DC and I want to hopefully join some bands, but I really want to get a job and I want to work for Obama. That was like my big dream. He was the first person I voted for. I was moving from like a rural community in Oklahoma and I really admired him. Like I was 18 when he became the president. I remember voting and working on that campaign. And then I was like, I want to meet this guy. I want to work for him. And I moved to DC after college, and through a series of extremely random events, I was able to work for him. And I hated that job more than any job I've ever had. I worked with these people who were, whatever, like I'm sure they're nice people, but they ran me ragged, like absolutely treated me horribly. And I also felt like, I sold all my music equipment to move to DC and get an apartment. And it was a choice I was making where I was like, I'm not going to do music. I'm going to be a real grown up and I'm going to like do this. And I did it and I hated it. And I was like, I got to change. So my partner at the time and we moved to New York in our mid 20s and I joined a hardcore band called Stay Inside. And I also played for like Melanie Charles, Lizzie No, jazz band, country band, was working at a couple studios. Like I just kind of really dove in. And I was also working a day job at a consulting firm. So I was making money doing like the things that I didn't like doing, but I also, all my evenings I was giving to all of this music and growing this community of people that I still work with and go to this day. And after the first big thing was like playing I remember playing this show. It was literally at the Delancey, which is a venue in New York that people kind of give a hard time, but It's a place that a lot of people end up playing before you know where to play in New York.
Mhm.
But I remember being like, yo, like I'm from Mustang, Oklahoma, and I'm playing a show in New York City. Like I made it. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did it. Yeah.
It's funny how that changes. We got this place called the Water
Uh,
Rats in London, and when I was, when I was a teenager, one of your friends' band would be playing the Water Rats. You're like, they think that's so sick. And as like a 25-year-old, I'm like, I'm way too cool for this. Not me, but you could sort of sense it, and maybe a part of me. But I recognized the ridiculousness in myself. Is like, that's so dumb. That's so dumb. We thought that place was uncool, was cool. Now it's ridiculous the way those places change in your mind.
yeah, totally. And I just remember playing that show and feeling so accomplished and like
Hell yeah.
I'm like really proud of myself for making a change in my own life. Because up until that point, I was just doing what I felt like I had to do. And then at that point, I was like, no, I want to do this. Like, I'm doing this. I don't care if it hurts or if it's uncomfortable or if I'm up too late and it's going to make my job suck. This is really what I want to do. And and it's just, one thing led to another thing, just kept gigging and playing as a guitar player and then writing my own songs and then getting really into recording and producing and then
Mhm.
making Live Forever. Yeah.
What was the big moment of recording? Was there one song that you put down by yourself and you were like, "Oh damn, that's the sound"?
Good question. I don't know. I feel like I was always fascinated by recording and I always wanted to learn how to do it better. And there was a couple times I just had so much fun doing it. It felt like an extension of the writing.
Yeah.
And so, once that marriage was complete, all I wanted to do was sit in my room and learn how to use my Space
Yeah.
Echo or my tape machine or my little drum machine and learn about phase cancellation and then the differences in compressors. It was just like my dad is like an engineer, like he worked on airplanes and he like works on cars and he makes maps and he loves very detail oriented little tinkery things. And I was never into any of that stuff, but that definitely is true about audio with me. And so I I kind of just in a maybe OCD way, but got kind of addicted to all these details of recording through songwriting and production. And like that was kind of more what guided me than like chasing sounds at the time. Like I was just like, how do you make how do I make the things I'm hearing in my head? And so that was almost more fun than the songwriting. Like it was just like I was writing songs so I could record. Yeah, because that was how I was learning by trial and error in my little room in my apartment. And then yeah.
That's awesome. And there's such like a lovely picture of you working in a small apartment. All these bands. I know you're a huge National fan, and have you read that 33 and a third book?
That's what I have. I have.
Yeah,
Come
and I didn't know
on.
that about them. I didn't know the Desners would write in their apartment, or you know what I mean. It's just like, of course, yeah, that's the way it happens.
Yeah. And that's dude, I mean, that's the shit. Like I love that shit.
Yeah,
It's like and I love them.
yeah,
Like just like on age and stuff, like having chapters in life.
yeah.
You know, those guys, Boxer, they were 36, 37 years old when Boxer came out, like, it's
That's
like,
sick.
and Aaron didn't produce his first record until after Boxer. It was like a Sharon Van Etten record, he's probably like late 30s.
Yeah. On like one of the more like sort of silly things is the one of the bits I remember from that book 33 and a third is when they were like, we hope Interpol lose their suits so they can't play the show and we can fill in.
Oh my God. That story kills me. Because that feeling, like I think Matt's describing, like they were in the practice room right next to theirs. And they'd be like, damn, that band is good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
dude, I remember sitting at my desk watching Dev Hynes and Serpent with Feet and Moses Sumney play Pitchfork Festival. I'm streaming it, writing press releases at my desk, just being like, oh my God, how do you get there? Like, is it crazy to even want to be there? Like, even
Yeah.
wanting it makes you feel like ridiculous. And,
Yeah. because it's so big. It's so bigger than you. You know, that feeling.
Yeah, and the distance feels so great, and like
Yeah.
I tell my friends this, it's like you believe you can do it, but no one else does. and, and you're just like pleading with the universe, like, give me a shot, please, 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 But dude, yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah.
man, the National, I pull so much inspiration from them, not only because of like how great they are as a band, but just like the dogged, like the relentlessness, like
Yeah.
that's just being like, I will not stop until you let me in.
And it doesn't have to be like raw power Iggy Pop style punk. You know, that's kind of the beauty of it. It's dogged, but it makes those beautiful sounds.
Yeah, it's just it's relentless. It's like how elevator music never stops.
Music.
Music. Love it.
101, 101, part-time jobs. 101, 101, 101, part-time jobs. This new record sounds exciting. I was listening to it all today, last couple of days. It's really cool. It's got really great sounds in, and makes sense when because I was hearing things on the third listen that you wouldn't hear on the first, and that's like a wonderful thing about album listening in general. But when you listen to the arrangements or the parts, like what you're hearing in the final mix, compared to what you felt like on the first record, Live Forever, can you see that huge mileage that you've made?
I can. I hope other people can. I mean, I've been working on this record for a long time, and I feel like it's my best one. And I think that
I think it's your best.
Yeah. And I think that like the production and like the recording is like so sick. Like I really had a very specific sound in mind. I didn't want something that was super clean and pristine and perfect. I wanted it to feel old and new. I wanted character more than anything, and I wanted a mess, but that was focused in a direction, like a ball of like a ball, like a calamity ball rolling downhill, just like
it's like a group chat. It's scrolling down the group chat.
Yes, or like like cartoons, when a bunch of cartoons get in a fight and they turn into a big whirlwind of fists and like screaming, and it's like a big swirl. Like that's the record to me. It's just like all of these feelings that are contained.
And that's not straightforward, right? I mean, getting all those feelings into an album, it's not straightforward.
It wasn't. I mean, I had to cut a bunch of songs, which sucked.
Is that painful?
Yeah, I was like, no, these are some of my favorites. But then I was like, they're all my favorites. So got some songs. But yeah, dude, like it's hard, but it was fun.
And working with Jack, what were those first few days? And you mentioned earlier that you hang out, you listen to music, you drink coffee together, maybe have a beer. What was the sort of first? Because the way I imagine it is that it takes a little while to get into this space, and once you're in that space, then it kind of magic life works. But getting to that space seems like the job, part of the work.
The cool thing about Jack is he's like a worker, he's like a plumber. Like he doesn't care what job he does. He's just like, the job has to get done, and he's a worker. So I think he and I share that. And so on day one, when we got in the studio, it became really clear that both of us just love making things, for one, and two, we're not precious about what job we're using, like what the job is. Like,
right.
He'll grab the coffees, I'll turn the tape machine on.
Yeah.
He'll run the desk, I'll play the bass. It's like, and then we'll switch. It's like both play the drums. Which one's better? I don't know. Let's use your kick and my snare and the overheads from the original take. Like he didn't give a shit about the things that a lot of people would give a shit about. When you think of like a high-powered, very successful producer, it was like working with like a friend in high school or in college, and that was from just like day one. And And yeah, I mean, that's I always wondered like, how is this guy getting so many gigs? And now I see it's like he is just a normal person
Yeah.
who is very generous and very good.
That's awesome. I can see his cheeky smile, under the glasses, the kind of like, yeah, let's do that, you can with a friend.
Yeah, and he's always down. There's never a bad idea with him, which is really nice thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Were there any moments that, like those days that just flew by and like you weren't even sure like what you were doing, it just went by, and by the end of it you had something where, when you're kind of in that, well, I guess like what you're saying, in that ball of the cartoon melee?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was interesting because I had kind of done like 80% of the record before I met him. And I thought I was kind of done with it. And we met up randomly at a festival, and he just invited me over and was like, bring the record, let's listen to it. And, let's just see what it is. And we listened to it all together, and he was like, you want to go back in on it? Maybe we can make some things a little bigger. And I was like, yeah, I would love to.
So you'd recorded 80% of it with someone else, with somewhere else, and you thought you'd done 80% of the finished thing at that point.
I mean, I thought I was done. Like, I was like, I think I finished it. It's kind of sick. Like, I went hard on this, But there were songs where I was like, I want more out of it, but I actually don't know where to go because I'm so close to the music now. I've been working on these songs for 3 years. So I need someone's perspective. I need more. I need another perspective. And so not the shapes of the songs didn't change, but the dynamic nature of them was improved greatly. And it was like songs like Sober, Too Much, Wants, Needs. Those are 3 examples where, if I showed you the demo for Too Much, you'd be like, oh, it's basically the same song, but this one is like fucking crazy,
Yeah, there's some wild guitar sounds, and I thought on like a mastering point of view, I was like, how has we gotten to 3/4 in of the song, and now it's just got the loudest it's been, but it didn't feel quiet before that point?
Space. It's all about space. I mean, something that Jack taught me is like, you can only put so much water in a bucket. It's like at a certain point, if you're going to put something in, you have to take something out. And so it became this game of like looking at every section and being like, what's in here? And when we go to the next section to make it louder, we're going to take things out, but we're just going to turn these things up. Fewer make them louder. So it's like you trick the ear with like volume and mass, thinking of them as 2 very different things.
Yeah. You
can have mass in a section that's filling space but is not loud, but feels loud. But then if you want volume, take things out, turn those things up. It's going to feel just as heavy as the mass, but it's just you're playing volume instead of width and depth. So it's like 3-dimensional way of thinking of the production, which is, dude, awesome. It's a very simple and basic idea, but when you think about it, you're like, yeah, like you can be louder with 3 instruments. It's like if you think about a power trio versus an orchestra, it's like Courtney Barnett in a power trio sounds just as big as the LA Philharmonic, but it's because there's more air. There's fewer things to focus on. You can make that sound huge. A Philharmonic, it's 150 people playing.
Yeah.
There's only so much space.
Hey, great to chat. Thank you for your time, Bartees. I got one question just to ask you, and I think maybe I'm projecting my own life of fucking up in the workplace here, because I've always made big mistakes at work, and I guess they range from like I was like a tour guide once, and I lost all the teenagers that I was supposed to be giving a tour around London. I lost a few of them on the tube. It was fine. We discovered them later on. But those kinds of moments where your heart just drops, I think there's nothing like it. I think when you work for yourself, like you and I do, if you make a boo-boo, it's cool. You fix it. But when you're working for someone else, you're like, oh, how do I explain this? So I want to ask you, what are those moments that you've had in your life? Are there any particular... Because, hey, you had high stakes for a bit back there.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some moments in my professional job where I was like, this is... I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen next here. So like a big thing, I don't even know how to explain this. So I worked in the climate movement, right? In my late 20s and up until I was like 31. And like, it's a largely like white space, a white, affluent Ivy League. In certain circles, that's the majority of the climate movement in the United States. If you look at like the Northeast, New York, DC kind of vibe, policy side. I'm like a black guy from the South. And one of the things I cared about was like environmental justice. So working with communities of color around environmental issues. And there were many instances where I knew like, I don't think I'm going to be able to get my bosses or the funders that I'm working with to really understand where this other group of people are coming from. And I facilitated a number of extremely heated, awkward conversations where people are just being called out for all sorts of racism and microaggressions and, historical things that, are all true. And I would just have to sit there and, you're looking at someone from like the Ford or MacArthur Foundation that you've been like, oh, you should really come down here and meet these people. Like they have a lot of interesting things to say. And you walk them in and they just get cooked by, a community of people who, have been suffering from the impacts of climate disasters that aren't being talked about in the news or aren't being funded. And, I'd always leave those meetings being like, that had to happen, but I'm like smack dab in the middle of this and they're probably going to cook me when I get back to New York.
So what would happen?
Well, I was a pretty savvy person and I would just be like, look, like you can be mad at me all you want, but like these people aren't going away. And like, it's better for you to deal with this now than for this to get louder and louder and louder. And those were always really stressful situations for me. I'm a very non-confrontational person. I hate being in the middle of shit, but those were situations where I was like, I kind of have to carry the water here. Like it sucks. This sucks. I hate this. I can't sleep. I know what's going to happen tomorrow and I know what's going to happen the day after tomorrow. And I'm just going to have to look these people in the face and be like, hey, I don't know. Sorry. Shouldn't have hired me.
So that was Bartees Strange here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Bartees' new record, Horror, is out on February the 14th. It's shaping up to be a good one. If you enjoyed that chat, make sure you click subscribe. We put out 2 episodes every week. We'd love to have you along. We also reinvigorated our Patreon, which, although it doesn't offer anything new, because my whole thing with this show is I want it to be free and accessible to everybody where possible. I don't want to hide anything behind a gateway or a paywall. I want it to be for everyone. We could still do with some extra change to help us do these shoots and do these filming episodes when we do them, for example. So if you're able to contribute from £1 upwards a month, you can head to patreon.com/101 part-time jobs and chuck us like the price of a beer over 5 months. That'd be massively appreciated. Thank you if you're able to do that. See you next week with a new episode with a Shaney White.
101 Part-Time Jobs is hosted by Giles Bidder and produced by me, Olivia Swash. This has been a Mighty Moon Media production.